Palm Beach to the White House.
I am your voice.
President-elect Donald Trump, now just hours from holding the highest office in America.
We're going to win, win, win. We're going to win so much you're going to get sick and tired of it.
Promising to bring sweeping changes nationwide.
We are going to drain the swamp of corruption in Washington, D.C.
The future of South Florida and the country taking shape.
We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again.
This is WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach.
In about 15 hours, Donald Trump will be sworn in at the nation's capital as the 45th president of the United States. He is charged with leading a country that is deeply divided. Thank you for joining us for WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach. I'm Tiffany Kenny.
And I'm Felicia Rodriguez. During the next hour, we take an in-depth look at Trump's impact on Palm Beach County, his rise to political power, and what he hopes to accomplish while in office. Sonica Dange is live for us near Trump's Palm Beach estate. We start with our co-anchor, Todd McDermott. He is in Washington, D.C. tonight, where it was a very busy day for the president-elect. Todd.
Felicia, it was a busy day, but tonight it's a little lonely here on the National Mall. The National Mall has been transformed. It's rigged up and ready to go for this historic day tomorrow. Behind me, you see the U.S. Capitol. It is dressed up in lights with bunting and flags for the swearing in and the speech tomorrow of the 45th President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump. Tonight, the Trump family has arrived here in Washington. More on that in just a moment. They'll be staying at Blair House, the official guest residence for the White House, and a traditional place for the president-elect to stay the night before he becomes the President of the United States. Now, as you said, it's been a busy day for the President-elect and for the Vice President as well. Vice President-elect Donald Trump and Mike Pence did lay wreaths at the Tomb of the Unknowns earlier today at Arlington National Cemetery soon after Mr. Trump arrived. Today there were also marching bands, performances, dance troupes, etc. at the Voices of the People show held on a stage on the southwest end of the reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial. Also a very special performance there by a group of Palm Beach County teenagers. I got to attend that performance. More on that later in our Chronicle special. And the president-elect also spoke at the Make America Great Again welcome concert at the Lincoln Memorial earlier this evening.
The polls started going up, 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 but they didn't want to give us credit because they forgot about a lot of us. On the campaign, I called it the forgotten man and the forgotten woman. Well, you're not forgotten anymore, that I can tell you. Not forgotten anymore.
Now that speech ended with some beautiful fireworks over the Lincoln Memorial, truly spectacular as the sun set on the nation's capital. In the morning, Mr. Trump, Mr. Pence, and their families will attend church services at St. John's Episcopal Church. That's right across the park from the White House, a very traditional place for those services before the inauguration itself. And now look at the rest of the schedule for the events tomorrow. They begin with President Barack Obama and the president-elect meeting at the White House before the swearing in. There will be tea and coffee served there. And then they make their way together to the Capitol here on the Mall for the swearing in. The inauguration ceremony itself begins at 11:30 in the morning. Mr. Trump himself is scheduled to be sworn in at about 11:47, 11:48. Mr. Pence will be sworn in as the vice president first. After they are both sworn in, Donald Trump delivers the inaugural address. Much more on that tonight, but we do believe it will be short, it will be optimistic, it will be an opportunity and a move to try to bring the country together. As I said, much more on that in this program. And then there's the congressional lunch, a traditional lunch that they have at the Capitol, and that's while everyone gathers on Pennsylvania Avenue for the inaugural parade. Mr. Pence and the new president of the United States, as well as his family, will make their way down Pennsylvania Avenue for the inaugural parade. It's 1.5 miles, could take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. But again, when they reach the end, they enter the White House, as that will be the president and his family's new home. And tomorrow night, he'll sleep in the White House as the new president. The FBI, again, will be watching over everybody during this event. Some 30,000 security personnel are in place. We made our way in here to the National Mall today. Heavy security, barriers, temporary fences, plastic flooring put down on most of the mall for all the people who will be attending. Also, there are huge screens, huge speakers, so people will be able to take part in this even if they are very far away. And as you look out on the National Mall tonight, imagine that sometime tomorrow, as many as 1 million people will fill this area and Pennsylvania Avenue for the inaugural parade as well. Whether the sun shines down on us or whether the rain clouds open on us, we will have a new president come noontime tomorrow. And for now, I'll send it back to Felicia and Tiffany in the studio.
And Todd, you'll be there with the front row seat to all the festivities. We'll check back in with you in a little bit, Todd. Thank you.
Well, on Palm Beach, the posh Mar-a-Lago is a top security concern.
The exclusive club sits on 20 acres, tucked in between the Intracoastal and the ocean.
The historic estate has 128 ornate rooms, offers fine dining, a spa and salon, even tennis and croquet.
The world-class club is secluded from the public, but Donald Trump does share it with as many as 500 members who are willing to pay $100,000 to join.
Basically, it's a compound, and we have to treat it as such.
Former Secret Service and ATF Special Agent Renny Rodriguez recently toured the area with a CNN reporter.
It appears there's a wall back there.
There's a wall, a tall wall.
It's more than 13 feet, I believe, which is great for deterring anyone trying to come on the premises.
And I love Florida. This is my second home.
Rodriguez says Secret Service teams are assessing threats that could come by land, sea, and air.
This would be a type of aircraft that an individual would use to drive his plane on the property.
And in the waters, some parts completely off limits.
The estate is used to having high-priority clientele. The club has hosted concerts by Celine Dion and Billy Joel. Even Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley spent their honeymoon there. Wow. And as you can imagine, protecting the president while he's here in Palm Beach County not only takes a lot of manpower, it is also very expensive.
In a rare sit-down interview, Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw talked to me about what it takes to keep the president safe.
We have the expertise because we've done it a lot, and we work seamlessly with the Secret Service. But it's very labor intensive because everywhere he goes, you have to protect the roadways, you have to protect the route.
The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is the only local agency, along with the Secret Service, involved in protecting the President of the United States when he visits our area.
Trying to balance between the protection of the president and making sure that the public is not too inconvenienced is a delicate balance because we don't want to shut down everybody's life just because the president's here.
Sheriff Rick Bradshaw says he has a dedicated unit for dignitary protection as well as a tactical street team assigned to assist in protecting the president while he's at his winter White House.
With Mar-a-Lago now, you're talking about 2 access points, one from the Intercoastal and one from the ocean. So you have to make sure those are secure, so we work very closely with the Coast Guard. It's a difficult area because the roadways are so close to the compound.
And what happens if Mr. Trump gets a late-night craving while on the island?
We have contingency plans in place for anything, any eventuality that would come up. If he wants, at midnight, if he decides he's going for a pizza, we're ready to go. Hopefully it'll be a delivery.
Sheriff Bradshaw says protecting presidents is something his department has done well before. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama have all visited Palm Beach County in recent years.
Air Force One, you know, it will come here, and while it's here, we also are responsible for making sure that's secure while it's on the ground. Logistically, we know how to do it. It's just going to be more often.
More visits from the president means more money and manpower needed to protect him. Back in November, the president-elect's 4-day visit for Thanksgiving cost the sheriff's office $250,000.
It's a very expensive proposition. There's an avenue for us to get it back. They've developed a process which we're going to take advantage of and make sure that we get reimbursed for our out-of-pocket expenses for everything that it costs to do what we need to do.
Interesting to note here, the sheriff tells me once Donald Trump became president-elect, he was basically afforded the same level of protection as the President of the United States. And keep in mind, whether Mr. Trump travels here with the family or not, they will still be have a certain level of protection for them as well.
And coming up later, Stephanie Brzezinski takes a more in-depth look at how the Sheriff's Office and the Coast Guard keep Trump safe while he is on Palm Beach. Martin County deputies will be among those in Washington, D.C. providing security for the inauguration.
Sheriff William Snyder says D.C. police reached out to his agency and requested specialized patrols.
We're on a list of agencies that are willing and able to go. You know, we consider it quite an honor, but a big responsibility to actually have a piece of the inaugural parade route for security purposes.
Sheriff Snyder says the federal government is footing the bill for his deputies to go to Washington. He would not say how many deputies are in D.C. Well, what do you want to see Trump address in his first 100 days in office? It's the topic right now on our WPBF 25 News Facebook poll question. Go to our WPBF 25 News Facebook page to weigh in. You can also weigh in on Twitter using the hashtag WPBFTrump100.
From lavish weddings to breaking ground on golf courses, Donald Trump is a fixture in Palm Beach County. Up next, the major headlines the incoming president continues to create in South Florida.
And we take a look at Donald Trump, the real estate mogul. You're watching WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach.
At this time tomorrow, we will have a new president of the United States. You're looking live at Mar-a-Lago on Palm Beach, the new winter White House. We're just hours away from the start of Donald Trump's inauguration, which we will carry live right here on WPBF 25.
Well, Tiff, there is no denying President-elect Donald Trump has quite a footprint, not only on Palm Beach, but throughout Palm Beach County. This holiday season, Trump played golf with Tiger Woods at Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach.
Whether he's playing golf or spending quality time with his grandkids, Trump is always making headlines. The president-elect has had a presence in South Florida since the 1980s. Morning show anchor Mark Kelly takes a look.
Donald Trump became a fixture in Palm Beach County in 1985 when he bought the historic Mar-a-Lago for $10 million. And just like that, dignified and reserved Palm Beachers had a new, brash neighbor in town, not afraid to shake things up.
I want to do something that's really special, and we have a very special piece of land. We have a piece of land right next to Palm Beach, which is very important to me, and that's where Mar-a-Lago is. So that instead of driving 35 or 40 minutes, people drive right over the bridge.
One of Trump's first big plays, building the 18-hole Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, just a stone's throw from the Palm Beach County Jail. Trump loved it, environmentalists hated it.
We've gone crazy here, Florida. Wake up, Florida. Let's start saving our natural habitat. We got plenty of golf courses.
Lawsuits against the Palm Beach International Airport were also par for the course. For the past 2 decades, Trump has been in a legal battle with the county, claiming the airplanes taking off and landing were too loud flying over Mar-a-Lago. He recently dropped his $100 million lawsuit because as president, planes can't fly over his estate when he's in town. And noisy planes didn't stop Trump from having his lavish, star-studded, over-the-top wedding to Melania at Mar-a-Lago in 2005. 3 years later, he attended his ex-wife Ivana's extravagant wedding also at Mar-a-Lago. From the I do's to the I don'ts, Trump ruffled a lot of feathers when he refused to remove this massive American flag flying high over Mar-a-Lago.
Everybody loves it, but the town council wants me to rip it down.
After years of fines and threatened lawsuits, Trump came out on top, getting to keep a slightly smaller red, white, and blue on his estate.
Everyone loves it. It's beautiful proportion. It's beautiful everything.
Now that Trump's about to be president, the political elite on this exclusive island appear to not want to talk to us about their longtime neighbor. The mayor declined to give us an on-camera interview, and the town manager told me he would not do an interview pertaining to anything President Trump. He also said the president is entitled to some privacy and relaxation when he comes to Palm Beach. But that privacy might be impossible now that Trump's the leader of the free world. Mark Kelly, WPBF 25 News Chronicle.
Well, before he became known as a politician, Donald Trump was known as a real estate tycoon.
Our Sonica Dange is live for us near Trump's Palm Beach estate. And Sonica, I know you've spent a lot of time looking into his properties.
That's right. Donald Trump owns more than 20 properties across the U.S., Most of them, about 9, are up in the Northeast, but 5 of them are right here in South Florida. The most iconic, of course, being the Mar-a-Lago, sitting right behind me. Right next to the Mar-a-Lago are 2 private homes also owned by Trump. They're valued at a combined $14.5 million. Just up the road, Trump also owns the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach and the Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter. But don't let the name on the buildings fool you. Across the country, there have been many projects that have used Trump's name, even if he no longer owns it or never did. The Trump Plaza in downtown West Palm Beach is a prime example of that. He relinquished ownership in 1991. Sonika Dange, WPBF 25 News Chronicle.
All right, Sonika, thank you. And still ahead, what Palm Beachers think of another winter White House on the island.
Plus, presidential history in Palm Beach County. The one story about JFK's time on Palm Beach that you've likely never heard before. When Donald Trump is sworn in tomorrow, he will do it with an approval rating of just 40%.
It is the lowest rating of any recent incoming president. Anchor Todd McDermott continues our special coverage from Washington, D.C. with a breakdown of the numbers. Todd?
Well, it has not been a boring or uneventful last 2 months and almost 2 weeks since Donald Trump won the presidency. There have been tweets, there have been charges, counter charges, there have been speeches and protests, and now it looks as if Donald Trump's handling of the presidential transition is causing a growing number of Americans to have growing doubts about whether he can handle the job as commander-in-chief. Now, to that poll, according to a CNN ORC poll released Tuesday, Mr. Trump's approval rating, as you said, stands at 40%. To give you some perspective, that particular approval rating is the lowest perhaps in history. It's certainly much lower than his 3 predecessors in office, at least 20 points below any of those 3 predecessors. And according to some polls, it is by far the lowest approval rating in the history of an incoming U.S. president. President Barack Obama took office with an 84% approval rating. George W. Bush was at 61%, even though he did not win the popular vote when he took office. And Bill Clinton came in with 67%. Mr. Trump's approval rating, almost 30 points higher among rural Americans than among those in America's urban centers. And remember, it was a handful of rural states who helped put Donald Trump over the top in the Electoral College to win the presidency. That's important when you think about where we go from here. Also, his approval rating is nearly 20 points higher among American men who were polled than among American women. And to that end, I actually spoke with a woman today who came all the way from Albuquerque, but will stay away from the National Mall tomorrow to be here for the Women's March on Washington to tell Donald Trump she believes America cannot go backwards. Those were her words. Fewer than half of those who were polled say Trump's priorities for the country reflect their own. Those in this poll are almost evenly divided on whether the policies he has proposed are the right direction for the country. But again, many of the people here tomorrow, and we expect at least 1 million people here, are here to celebrate a changing of the guard and a change in the direction of this country. And I should also point out that after this poll, there was a tweet. You may have seen it, Mr. Trump posting a tweet saying, quote, the same people who did the phony election polls and were so wrong are now doing approval rating polls. They are rigged just like before. One thing to point out about that is many of the state polls ended up being wrong and did not predict a Trump victory. However, the national polling showed Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote by about 2 to 4 percentage points, something that actually was accurate in the long run. It doesn't matter what the polls say right now. Donald Trump takes the oath of office tomorrow and makes a speech, as I said earlier, that will seek to unify the country, and we move on from there. All right, for now, we'll go back to the studio to Felicia and Tiffany. Much more from the National Mall in just a few minutes.
Todd, thank you.
Well, more than 50 Democratic members of Congress say they will not attend Donald Trump's inauguration, including local Congressman Alcee Hastings. Some made the decision weeks ago, but others announced their intentions after Trump lashed out on Twitter at civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis. Lewis says he does not believe Trump will be a legitimate president because of Russia's perceived interference in the election.
Well, as you can imagine, Trump's presidency is the talk of Palm Beach now that there is another winter White House.
Let's go back to Sonika Dange, who is near Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. And Sonika, what are people there saying about Trump?
Well, we all know that Palm Beach is already very well known across the country, but the town is getting more attention because of its close ties with the president-elect. His Mar-a-Lago club has held many charity events and seen its fair share of celebrities. So the town of Palm Beach is no stranger to the spotlight. Most residents I spoke to say they don't anticipate much change.
I think people are more curious about Palm Beach since President-elect Trump lives here.
We've had a couple people who are here visiting and tourists who were inquiring about Mar-a-Lago.
If Donald Trump wasn't elected president, Palm Beach would still be spectacular Palm Beach. So it is what it is.
And of course, the biggest concern could be the added traffic delays when the president comes into town. However, the residents that we spoke to here on the island tell me that the town did a wonderful job handling both traffic restrictions as well as security the last 2 times that he was here in town for the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. They tell me that had they not heard from the news, they wouldn't have even been able to tell he was in town. So they're not too worried. Sonika Dange, WPBF 25 News, Chronicle.
All right, Sonny, thank you. And in just a matter of hours, Trump and his family will move into the White House. And tonight we're getting a look at how the move out and move in process happens so quickly.
Our Sally Kidd is at the White House. And Sally, tomorrow isn't just Inauguration Day, it is move-in day for Trump.
That's right, Tiffany and Felicia. It's officially known as the transfer of families, and this happens around 10:30, immediately after President Obama and the president-elect leave the White House and head to the Capitol for the swearing in. A mad scramble takes place. Workers go through this home and start packing up any remaining personal belongings that the Obamas have left behind. And then we're going to see 2 moving trucks come in, one of them to take the Obamas' belongings out of here, the other one bringing the Trump's belongings here. Also, the residents, we understand, is going to get a good cleaning. And then any new furniture, curtains, artwork, decor, anything the new first family has requested is going to be put in place when the Trumps arrive to the White House for the first time as the new first family after the inaugural parade in the afternoon. They will have their favorite food in the fridge. Their clothes will be hanging in the closet. His socks will be in the sock drawer. The whole thing will be transformed into the Trump's new home. Back to you.
Must be nice to have all that done for you.
Can you imagine?
As opposed to unpacking yourself.
Right.
Sally, I have to ask you, so what's next for the Obamas?
They're headed on vacation. They're actually tomorrow afternoon after the ceremony, they're headed to Palm Springs. The president has said that he's looking forward to sleeping late on Saturday morning. You can imagine he'll probably be getting in some golf, relaxing, and then when they come back to Washington, they're going to be living in a new home just a few miles from here. They have rented a large home there. They're sticking around so that their youngest daughter, Sasha, can finish high school. Back to you.
Allie, thank you. That sleeping in on Saturday may last for days.
Oh, yeah.
Well, coming up, unprecedented access. The photographer carrying on his father's legacy on Palm Beach.
Plus, Trump's first 100 days in office, the 4 big changes on the president-elect's agenda. You're watching WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach.
You're watching WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach.
We are just hours away from Donald Trump being sworn in as the 45th president of the United States. Here's a look at the countdown. The president-elect has already laid out what he plans to do within the first 100 days in office. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Felicia Rodriguez.
And I'm Tiffany Kenny. Donald Trump is promising sweeping changes the minute he gets into the Oval Office. We have live team coverage tonight. Sonika Dange is live on Palm Beach outside Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. We start with anchor Todd McDermott live in Washington, D.C. And Todd, Trump's plan includes everything from term limits to repealing the Affordable Care Act.
And that repeal of the Affordable Care Act is the #1 issue on the minds of many Americans right now. something the Republicans used the label of as Obamacare as pejorative long ago, and Trump has long said he would scrap it, repeal it, and then replace it. This week, he said that he was working on a plan, health care for all. Might have been a surprise to some congressional Republicans at this point. During a speech in Gettysburg back in October, then candidate Donald Trump laid out what he wants to do during those 100 days, the first priority being the scrapping of the ACA. That drew the biggest applause when we covered him on the campaign trail, but there are other pledges as well. His pledge to suspend immigration from terror-linked regions of the world where proper background checks can't be done on those who enter the U.S. Also, he has talked about building the wall and making Mexico pay for it. Now he says he wants the American taxpayers to pay for it and then bill Mexico for that wall along the border. And he's promising to drain the swamp, including imposing term limits on Congress, a hiring freeze on federal employees, and limits on lobbyists, although there is some consternation about the links between lobbyists and many of the billionaires that Trump has nominated for cabinet positions. Lawmakers also face two key spending deadlines within the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. The deadline to raise the debt ceiling, March 16th. You may remember the debt ceiling. It'll mark the first time Congress will vote to increase the debt ceiling since a 2015 deal brokered between President Obama and then House Speaker John Boehner, who is long gone from the U.S. Capitol now. The second deadline is April 28th. That's when lawmakers will need to pass a government funding bill or risk a total government shutdown, something we are sure they and the Trump administration would like to avoid. For now, there is no way to know which direction the Trump administration will go on spending, though there has been some talk of major spending on infrastructure in this country. Felicia and Tiffany, back to you.
All right, Todd, thank you. Well, what do you want to see Trump address in his first 100 days? It is the topic of our WPBF 25 News Facebook poll question. Go to our WPBF 25 News Facebook page so you can weigh in. You can also weigh in on Twitter using the hashtag WPBF Trump 100. Flea?
Well, Donald Trump isn't the first president to frequent Palm Beach County. Of course, we know about the Kennedys' deep connection to the island. As morning anchor Aaron Guy found out, there are several presidents who escaped the D.C. rush to relax here in South Florida.
Mar-a-Lago, the center of the South Florida Trump universe. It's where he vacations, where his family celebrates the holidays, and now where media crowds every time he's in Palm Beach County. But before the glamorous club that sits oceanside, there were many sitting presidents who caused a stir when they visited Palm Beach County.
The Kennedy family is probably the most famous.
The 35th president of the United States spent a lot of his life on Ocean Boulevard. Debbie Murray, the chief curator at the Historical Society of Palm Beach County, shared a series of buried pictures like this one. Kennedy with an old war injury and Jackie right there by his side.
The earliest photograph we have in this collection is of Kennedy on a gurney as he's being transferred from a plane to go to the Kennedy's Palm Beach house to recuperate.
Many of the Kennedy pictures were taken at the well-known Winter White House, a Kennedy estate on Palm Beach. Though Murray says he didn't always stay there.
He did stay at that house sometimes when he was president, but most often they rented another house.
But this picture, perhaps the most monumental, announcing his cabinet in December of 1960.
He made his announcements here in Palm Beach. This is on their back patio.
There are countless stories about presidential visits. One I heard right here at the Historical Society. JFK hopping in a convertible one day by himself, heading south, straight to Miami, only to run out of gas, end up on the side of the road, and had to be rescued by his staff. Of course, America's royal family was mainly seen just going to and from the beach on Palm Beach and to church. But what about America's stylish First Lady?
I have heard some people relate that they did see her shopping on Worth Avenue.
But it wasn't just the Kennedys. George H.W. Bush was known to visit his mother, who had a home on Jupiter Island, while President Warren Harding came to South Florida for some me time.
That's him here in Palm Beach. He was here to fish.
And we can't forget President Herbert Hoover, whose name is heard frequently in western Palm Beach County. After the deadly hurricane of 1928, he ordered the Army Corps of Engineers to do something to protect the people. That's when the Herbert Hoover Dike was created around Lake Okeechobee.
And that's the picture we have here of Herbert Hoover at that dedication of the dike.
Now we embark on another year, another president, another round of pictures, another round of stories, and history to be made. Aaron Guy, WPBF 25 News Chronicle.
When Palm Beach was the winter home to Kennedy, there was only one photographer the family called, Bob Davidoff. And now his son, Daryl, continues his father's legacy.
Over the years, photographer Bob Davidoff took countless images of the Kennedys on Palm Beach, the first family headed to Easter Mass in 1963, the president's helicopter landing on a fairway at the Palm Beach Country Club, and this one, taken as Kennedy left town. 4 days later, he flew to Dallas, where he was assassinated.
It was one of the last photographs that my father ever took of JFK, and that was when he was in the leaving at the airport, and he just came a little wave goodbye, and that was his last wave from Palm Beach International Airport. He probably took hundreds and hundreds of photographs of them.
Davidoff's son, Daryl, says his father got unprecedented access to the first family because of his relationship with Kennedy's mother, Rose. She would often tip him off to the family's whereabouts.
It got to the point where the Secret Service kept saying, how is it that Mr. Davidoff keeps showing up at all these, how does he know where the president's going to be and where the mama's going to be? They were very good family people, and they always seemed to make him feel like he was part of the family.
It was a relationship that would last for decades. And now it's Daryl Davidoff who is behind the camera, also taking photos of a future president.
And Mr. Trump is a totally different person. You know, he's a little standoffish. You know, when he walks in the room, everyone understands that he is the boss and that everyone's to be on their best behavior around the boss.
Davidoff got to see Trump's no-nonsense business style while working as the Mar-a-Lago photographer when the club first opened.
With Mr. Trump, I think it was more of a business with him. You know, we were the club photographers there for 10 years from the very start of the club, and every year he would come to us and he would say, "You're fired," and he would renegotiate it.
The culture of the island has long changed since the Kennedys were here, but once again, it's the focus of the headlines as the winter home of our country's president.
I don't think he ever would have expected Mr. Trump to have become president. But, you know, now I think he'd be very proud of the fact that here we are, you know, with another president here in Palm Beach.
And another Davidoff.
And another Davidoff photographing that president.
Such a rich history that the family has. Sure. The island has changed so much since the Kennedy era, just in the fact that there are really now twice as many people living there.
That is true, and having the access to the president like Davidoff had to Kennedy will never happen again. Well, whenever Donald Trump visits South Florida, you can expect tight security in the air, on land, and in the water surrounding his Palm Beach estate.
Stephanie Brzezinski explains the one key change that could relieve traffic congestion when Trump visits.
Whether it's marine traffic, air traffic, or road traffic, incoming President Donald Trump's visits to Palm Beach County will interrupt daily life in some way, shape, or form.
Whenever Trump decides to visit his winter White House, the Coast Guard will set up security zones around Mar-a-Lago. Here are the 3 zones that will be heavily patrolled throughout the duration of Trump's visits to Palm Beach. We've already seen those zones in action, with patrols on the water in both the Intracoastal and the Atlantic Ocean when Trump celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas with his family. Any vessel that needs to travel through a security zone must contact the Coast Guard. Violators can face a stiff fine of more than $88,000 and even prison time up to 12 years. Once Trump is sworn in, a presidential temporary flight restriction will follow him wherever he goes, including the skies over Palm Beach County. According to the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, a standard presidential TFR will have significant economic and operational impact on 6 airports here in South Florida, including Palm Beach International and Lantana. Presidential TFRs typically cover a 30 nautical mile radius area that extends from the ground up to nearly 18,000 feet. It requires pilots to be on an active flight plan, squawk a discrete transponder code, and maintain two-way communications with air traffic control.
And once Air Force One touches down here at Palm Beach International, Trump can either drive from the airport to Mar-a-Lago or take Marine One, the presidential helicopter. Just recently, the town of Palm Beach granted Trump permission to use his estate as a designated helicopter takeoff and landing zone.
But if Trump chooses to take a land convoy, roadways, intersections, and exit and entrance ramps along Southern Boulevard and the interstate will be cleared and shut down. The temporary blockades will, of course, interrupt regular traffic flow.
All these traffic interruptions will become the new norm here in Palm Beach County, but just how often? Well, that remains to be seen. That all depends on Trump's desire to escape D.C. for sun, sand, and seclusion behind his mansion walls. Stephanie Brzezinski, WPBF 25 News, Chronicle.
The mayor of West Palm Beach is weighing in on Donald Trump taking office.
Well, she hopes the Trump presidency means a financial boost to her city.
I'm hoping it's a positive impact, that we might get some of the federal funding that we've been looking for. I'm going to look at it in a positive way.
And as you just heard her, the mayor believes that Trump can have that positive impact on the city's financial district. Well, everybody wants to know what Donald Trump will say during his inaugural address. Coming up, we're going to go back live to Washington, D.C. with a sneak peek.
Plus, a presidential performance. Meet the local students getting the opportunity of a lifetime to show off their talents. You're watching WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach. Welcome back. You're watching Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach, as we count down to President-elect Donald Trump taking the oath of office to become the nation's 45th president. The president-elect's inaugural address is expected to echo a similar message delivered by past presidents.
Donald Trump's speech will focus on unity. New presidents have often used their inaugural addresses to try to bring the country together. Let's go back to Todd McDermott in Washington, D.C. with a preview of what Trump will say. Todd?
Tiffany, Felicia, with that low approval rating we mentioned, it's an important speech, even more important to the incoming president, Donald Trump. He's working on what is expected to be a relatively short speech. He's been working on it for quite some time. It could be possibly less than 20 minutes. It would be no surprise at all. When Mr. Trump was on Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago for the Christmas holidays, he spent time working on the address and talked about it and tweeted out this photo this week. The topics are said to include the education system, infrastructure, border security, the state of the military, the economy, outsourcing of jobs. And historian Douglas Brinkley also recently met with Trump, and they talked about the impact of the speech.
He seemed to be interested in making a shorter inaugural. He's reading other people's inaugural. He wants to make sure it has his stamp, that guys like me, historians, later won't say Trump didn't write that, somebody else did. And I do think the model for this is the unity speech he gave after, he won the election.
A speech that drew praise from both Republicans and Democrats, by the way. Trump's transition team has said the president-elect will get input from Stephen Miller, who is a policy aide who crafted Trump's convention speech. Again, he will give that speech early tomorrow afternoon. He is supposed to be sworn in about 11:47, 11:50. The speech will soon follow that and could be over relatively quickly before that lunch at the Capitol and then the parade. Either way, it is an important speech and it is history in the making. Tiffany and Felicia?
All right, Todd, thank you.
Presidential history was on the curriculum for some local students today.
Let's go back out to our Sonica Dange on Palm Beach. And Sonica, this is a moment these kids will never forget.
It's such an incredible moment, Felicia and Tiffany. The students at King's Academy in West Palm Beach actually arrived in Washington, D.C. earlier this week to get settled in, and they did not disappoint during today's performance. Check it out. That is the King's Academy Chorus singing and dancing their hearts out for people gathering around the Lincoln Memorial. 80 students performed. They were just one of 12 organizations invited to perform during today's welcoming ceremony.
We are very patriotic at our school and we believe in our republic. We think we have a very great nation. And one of the great things about our nation is every 4 years we get to celebrate the peaceful transition of power, and that's what we're seeing here this weekend, and our kids get to experience that.
They did have to shorten their program, but they were given the honor of closing the early afternoon performance. The inauguration committee said that they chose these students because of their talent and their enthusiasm, and they did a great job today. Sonica Dange, WPBF 25 News, Chronicle.
Yeah, and what an experience for them,
Oh, my
right?
goodness.
Can you imagine high school going and doing that?
Incredible.
Well, up next, from a field of GOP heavyweights to made-for-TV moments, the key moments that helped launch Donald Trump to the White House. The last 19 months on the campaign trail have been a wild ride.
Morning anchor Mark Kelly has more on Trump's leap from TV star to the White House.
I am officially running
for President of the United States.
It was a made-for-TV moment from a man who knows how to entertain.
You're fired. You're fired. You're fired.
From the gilded halls of Trump Tower in June 2015, real estate and entertainment mogul Donald Trump threw his hat in the political ring.
We are going to make our country great again.
Among a field of GOP heavyweights, 17 to be exact, Trump looked likely to get knocked out early, but the polls showed otherwise.
Trump now has a 7-point lead over Ted Cruz.
Emboldened, Trump outlined how he would make America great again, from a complete ban on Muslims entering the country to a wall along our southern border that Mexico will pay for.
Are you really going to build a wall?
Yes.
These new, unconventional ideas shook up the grand old party.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. He's playing the members of the American public for suckers.
And fired up a populist base that for decades felt ignored.
I wish my vote counted for 1 million because he'd be a shoo-in at that point.
It's a done deal. It's a wrap.
And in March, those voters rewarded Trump on Super Tuesday, sweeping 7 of the 11 states during the primary. But in many cities from coast to coast, Trump's message did not sit well. Protests in Chicago forced Trump to cancel a rally, and security was on high alert at the July convention in Cleveland.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
That's also where the country got a closer look at Trump's VP, Mike Pence, a traditional conservative from Indiana.
I accepted Donald Trump's invitation to run and serve as Vice President of the United States of America.
3 months to go until the election, a shakeup with Team Trump. Campaign head honcho Paul Manafort quits after a brewing controversy over his work in Ukraine, and political unknown Kellyanne Conway takes the helm.
This campaign will be won on the issues.
As summer turns to fall, the tone of the presidential campaign takes a chilly turn. The weaknesses of the final 2 candidates now on full display. For Hillary Clinton, it was those emails.
I communicated about classified material on a wholly separate system.
For Trump, new allegations of sexual harassment, and this time, it was all caught on video.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the
Certainly, I'm not proud of it, but that was something that happened.
Election 2017 was shaping up to be Clinton's to lose, and to the surprise of millions, that's exactly what happened.
This is painful, and it will be for a long time.
Donald Trump, the man with his name chiseled in gold all over the world, won over the Rust Belt, and tomorrow takes over the highest office in the land. Mark Kelly, WPBF 25 News Chronicle.
And here's another look at tonight's live Facebook poll. Here's the question. What do you want to see Trump address in his first 100 days? The Affordable Care Act has been leading the way all night. You can go to our WPBF 25 News Facebook page to weigh in. You're watching WPBF 25 News Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach. Let's check in now with Todd McDermott one final time in Washington, D.C. tonight. Todd, at this time tomorrow, the new president will no doubt be celebrating.
And between now and then, when daylight comes, the National Mall here, so quiet, so sedate and serene, will be filled with people both to support and protest the election of Donald Trump. Imagine, though, a famous billionaire, non-politician, taking the oath of office as the 45th commander-in-chief of this country. It is truly an historic day. I talked to some people who say this is what America has always needed, others who fear what's coming. But tomorrow, either way, we will celebrate democracy as Donald Trump becomes our next president of the United States. We'll be here in the morning for everything that happens, as well as for the parade, a block here on Pennsylvania Avenue, and of course, complete coverage at 5, 6, and 11. See you in the morning as well. Tiffany and Felicia, it is quite a night.
All right, Todd, thank you. We look forward to your reports tomorrow. And thank you for watching Chronicle, the presidency and Palm Beach. I'm Tiffany Kenny.
And I'm Felicia Rodriguez. Stay tuned for a special edition of 2020, America's New First Family, the Trumps Go to Washington.